everyone. As Jag said, we are Katy, Dan. I'll let Dan introduce him, but I'm Katy Neep. I head up our employer engagement and partnership work at Youth Futures Foundation. Dan, do you want to introduce you?
And I am an economist, senior economist in our evidence and evaluation team. So thinking about how we evaluate things basically effectively.
So Youth Futures Foundation, for those of you who don't know who we are and what we do, we are a national What Works Centre. What does that mean? In a nutshell, that means that we hopefully generate and curate evidence and research that I guess is held to some of the highest standards in terms of some of the methodologies that we use, and we're going to talk to you today about one of them. But really our focus as a What Works Centre is all about how can we ensure more young people, and specifically marginalised young people, get into good employment, so they gain and sustain good employment. And really what we want to see is that equitable future, it's a difficult word to say, for all young people, and for them to be in good work. And we very much stress that word, good work. So why do we do this? Dan, if you click on. We exist really because tragically today almost 1 million young people are not in employment, education or training. To put that in context, that's nearly 1 in 8 young people across England, across the UK I think. And we know that specifically for certain cohorts of young people, that the barriers to entry into employment, to gain and sustaining those good employment outcomes, is even harder. So the slide here captures some of that, but to bring it to life, if you have an SEND, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to be not in education, employment or training. If you're a care leaver, you're 5 to 10 times more likely not to be in education, employment and training. So there are clearly some entrenched systemic issues that mean these young people are not able to access the opportunities which we know are out there, because we know currently that vacancy rates, almost match the need figure. So if you were doing some simple maths, why couldn't we just put the two together and solve it straight away? It's not that easy, obviously, but there is a skills and there is a talent crisis in the UK. So how are we not bridging those gaps? So the final bit, I guess, on who we are is kind of what do we do as an organisation. So if you flick over, and then we'll get into the specifics. Sorry, Dan. What we do. So we do 3 things, I would say, as an organisation. The first, as I kind of alluded to, around being a What Works Centre, is really to find and generate that high quality evidence. We really want to understand the unemployment challenge, understand why those barriers still exist, but importantly, try to identify those solutions that will work to shift the dial. And actually, equally as importantly, work out the solutions that don't work, so that we can stop doing them and we can focus time, energy and resource on the ones that do. So find and generate high quality evidence in order that we can then put that evidence into action, which is part of the reason that we're here today. So I spend my day-to-day working with employers and partners to share the evidence that we've already generated, to kind of explain to them about how they can maybe change some of the recruitment practices, some of the retention practices, but also importantly, how we can learn from what employers are currently doing and how we can put that evidence into real-time context. Because, you can have data, you can have evidence, you can have solutions, but does it work in a day-to-day when everyone's trying to run a business or get people onto a construction site? So putting that evidence into action is really pivotal. And then finally, obviously, for us as an organisation, embedding youth voice is critical, it's paramount, it is essential to what we do. Nothing about us without us is very much a mantra that we live by. We have young members of our board, we have a Future Voices group which help to guide and inform our practice, and then through our evidence and through our projects we also ensure that we're embedding young people to help guide us through that. So embedding youth voice, making sure that that evidence really does resonate and represent, I guess, the voices of young people is really important. So that's who we are and what we do. But specifically today, as I mentioned, we're here about kind of turning that evidence into action and ensuring that we can generate some great evidence. So over to Dan, who's going to run you through the technical bit.
Fab. Thank you, Katie. Yes, so this is a specific opportunity. We're basically looking for partners to, employers to partner with on in order to achieve sort of the goals that Katie really well set out before. So we are in 2024, rather, we're now 2025. We launched our employer trials program. So this is a multi-year, multi-million-pound program of evidence generation activity. So we want to work with employers to understand what changes they can make to their recruitment and employment practices in order to help support the marginalised group of young people that we focus on to enter into and sustaining good work. So basically, how do they recruit, in what way, how do they employ, what are they doing when individuals get enrolled to sort of sustain those outcomes and achieve our objectives. So what we're doing with our partner employers, we are working with them to kind of understand the challenges they face in recruiting and employing marginalised groups of young people. And sort of, auditing and like testing out and looking at their practice and see what we think could be changed. So kind of co-designing changes within that might be able to address the problems they face. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we need to do on the supply side, upskilling, training, all those sorts of things. But this is really kind of focusing on what can be done from the demand side. We've got other programs of activity for all those other issues that are clearly out there. And then within that, we then sort of identify a form of practice that we could change and we want to test out. We think it's going to be a positive step. And then we test it through what's known as a randomized controlled trial. This is the sort of techie bit. Basically, if you think, kind of like your medical trials, your drug trials. So when a new drug's being introduced, before it goes out to market, they'll kind of trial it out with a small group of people, give half the population sort of the drug, the new drug, half the population kind of placebo, and compare the outcomes and sort of, treatment rates, that sort of thing. That's the kind of concept here. So basically, very techie, but the headline thing is that's the best quality evidence you can get at evaluating something. It's incredibly innovative, it's incredibly robust, and it's well travelled in other spaces than just like in the medical fields. And then, as Katie, as you said, the whole point of this is we don't just want to do things with one individual employer, we want to kind of scale up effective practice. So we share that evidence and build a real kind of advocacy case in, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, it achieves these outcomes and these objectives for yourselves as a business. What sorts of things can we look at and test? It's a little bit ethereal, so we've got a few examples, but these are just examples. This is like quite a generic list. We kind of go through a kind of process of working with employers to kind of think of bespoke solutions to the sort of challenges they face. So, if they've got a large drop-off in ethnic minority diversity in the interview stage, we might have a look at the interview process. What are they doing there? What could be changed? What could be improved? But these are just sort of three neat examples really to kind of explain what these sort of practices are. So firstly, not every employer includes salary information on a vacancy. About 50% of vacancies don't include salary information. We think that could be a barrier to certain groups and applying to roles. So we would like to work with employers. So for example, add that information to a selection of their salary, selection of their vacancies and test out the application rates between different groups and see what effect it has. Secondly, anonymised hiring. Some of the feedback I guess we get is that's quite commonplace. Not everyone's doing it, and CVs, perhaps want to go into the dustbin of history, possibly. But if we're going to keep CVs around, there's potentially a way of doing it better. Anonymised hiring, removing elements of the CV that could be, introduce sources of bias against the individual that are not related to their ability to kind of perform in role. So removing that problem potentially. Third idea. You might have seen last year, about summertime, I think it was, John Lewis announced they were going to start sharing their interview questions with candidates pre-interview. The idea with that is to kind of help support individuals to prepare who might have SEND or might have anxiety disorders, those kind of things where, might struggle to perform well in an interview and demonstrate their suitability for a role, but actually could be great employees and great talent. So that's the sort of thing that we might look at. As I say, though, these are all kind of generic ideas. We want to look and test loads of different things. So we've got a list of 30 different ideas, but there's so much that could happen in this space because there's just such little evidence as to what is good practice. And I'll give you an example about that. Right, the sharing interview questions idea, it sounds nice. However, what happens if that has adverse effects on individuals that don't have time to prepare for the interviews? Certain groups have got more time, more resource to do the preparation. That produces biases in other ways. We just don't know. We don't know if it is effective or not. So whilst it might be helping to support SEND individuals, it might have a sort of a counterbalancing effect on socioeconomically disadvantaged. We don't know. That's the kind of thing we'd like to step in and test out, really. What are we sort of doing in this program as a whole? So as I say, there's really limited evidence in the youth employment space of what is effective, and also particularly working with employers. It is hard. It's a challenging thing to do, produce that really high quality evidence, but we believe it's incredibly valuable and needs doing. And also as part of that kind of research and evidence generation that goes on with employers, no one really considers the business case. So, okay, we've got this moral argument, this social argument, why we should be doing this and achieving these goals. But ultimately, if we're going to kind of take everyone on that journey with us, we need to have that sort of kind of ROI case alongside it to say, look at this. If you introduce this, you know, your practice is more inclusive, you're sourcing wider talent pools, you're getting better quality candidates, better employees, that kind of thing. That's the sort of argument we want to make, really. As I say as well, no one really knows what best practice is. I gave the example previously, but really there's limited evidence that sits behind recruitment practices altogether, to be honest. And then thirdly, obviously, employers, key role in achieving the goals we want to. You know, all the work can be going on sort of upskilling and training and all that sort of supply side activity, but unless the roles that are being created are accessible to all the groups that we care about, we're not going to see those employment outcomes that we want to. So that's really our objective with this program. So what are we looking for in a partner? So we've kind of gone through this recruitment process. We've sourced like a large number of employers who want to work with us, which is amazing, but we're still on the hunt for new partners. Rule of thumb, first point really is they need to be large, basically. How large? Very rough rule of thumb. We're looking for partners that have got roughly 5,000 employees at least. It's very rough, and we love to have conversations with everybody, but ultimately scale matters in terms of giving us confidence in the findings we're going to produce from our research. Employers we want to work with also need to be, really open-minded, be willing to have honest conversations about where the practices are working, where they aren't, and also, be willing to improve and looking to improve. We then kind of want those to work with partners as well. They've got, key buy-in from senior staff that want to make those changes and have the ability to do so, and are able to commit sort of time to this, this partnership and these opportunities. Then they've got to be willing for the learnings to be shared publicly, so we can really achieve that system-wide goal of that overall, objectives. Why should employers be interested in partnering with us? Well, we're a fabulous team and, it's a wonderful opportunity. But specifically, obviously we want to help us achieve our social goal. This is a really key piece for us in kind of building out that evidence base and tackling the issues we want to. Secondly, we've got kind of, we're building up a cohort of sort of 10, 15, 20 of the largest employers in the country. It would be great to kind of be part of that really innovative group and doing something really quite unique and interesting. Thirdly, the sort of, I guess we're kind of providing sort of critical friend consultancy type services for free. I used to be a sort of consultant, as it were, so I know that these are expensive things to have. We're doing that for free to kind of really just help make sure those, we achieve those changes, improve practices widely. Fourthly, bespoke evidence for your organisation of how effective the kind of the practice that we're looking at. So does showing interview questions work for you or doesn't it? And then secondly, how can you improve implementation with that? Is there a better way you could do it? How can you get better with that in your organisation? And then the last point really is, I guess, a sort of a key branding marketing point. This is a way, partnering with us is a way to really demonstrate a genuine commitment to social issues. So firstly, obviously, that's got huge branding elements. And we, through that advocacy campaign, there'll be opportunities to kind of be associated with us and sort of partner on events and things like that. But then also for organisations that are kind of filling out, I guess, social value elements of tenders, public contracts, etc. This is a really high value add to them as well. How have we got on so far? As I said, we've been very successful. We've had conversations with sort of 30 odd employers, aiming to sort of speak to 14 to 16, run 14 to 16 of these partnerships by 2028. We're launching our first 3 partnerships very, very soon, crossing I's, dotted T's on legal agreements. One with a FTSE 250 construction company, one with a FTSE 100 utilities company, and then one with a brand who you will all be aware of, but I will not say who they are, which is a major national infrastructure organisation. We've also then anticipate launching a huge number of more of these in 2025. So I've got a list there of some of the things the organisations we're working in and the things we want to look at. But we are still on the hunt for more partners. There's so many things we want to do still, and we just need to find the right partners for it. FAQs, lots of text, sorry about this. But okay, so we already do, if you're coming from an employer organisation, you might be thinking, we already do a lot in this space. Why should we bother? Well, no one's perfect. Everyone we've worked with, we've always found there's room for improvement in terms of the practices, come up with loads of suggestions of ways that could be improved, and we've done it with everybody basically. Secondly, we already have our plans in place for next year. As I say, this is a multi-year program, so really we're looking to sort of line up partners this year and beyond. And also we could sort of look at, if you've got things changes your practice plan, could we have a look at changing them or evaluating them? And then the third thing, we don't want to commit more time, commit without more information. This is definitely a process, no commitment required now. Huge process of us to go through and like share learning and understand exactly what it looks like, what the commitment is to yourselves, and there's clear opportunities throughout our partnership to pull out as well. Sounds great. How do we get involved? Come and say hello. We're here. This is Katy and Dan. These are our emails. This QR code doesn't work. Sorry about that. So one of the alternative options is available, and then also speak to Jagdeep, who I'm sure will be very happy to put us in touch. Amazing. Have you got any questions? And then we've got a suggestion of a workshop activity. How are we doing for time as well?
We're good, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any questions? Stunned silence. There we go.
So these guys were talking a little bit about a lot about inclusive recruitment earlier on. What's the strategy or support for after recruitment? Because I think I've worked with a very large organisation who tried successfully to have a much more inclusive recruitment process to get a broader group of people into their traditionally white male middle-aged workforce. Very successful in getting those people on board. Not as successful in retaining them, because when they went in that business, they didn't see anything that looked like them in that business or in that site. So you could have a really successful approach here.
Yeah.
The companies that you're working with might see it as an absolute failure because they've not been able to retain them. So is there all that you're doing or others are doing in that space to support that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is very much in scope, and that's the sort of thing we want to look at. So is it on there? One of these at the bottom, I won't say which one, but one of these, yes, one of the issues we've identified with them is they have sort of made some quite significant changes to their recruitment practice for their apprenticeship recruitment. However, they have clear problems with sort of line management once they get into role, and some challenging behaviours and sort of issues in that space. So one of the things we're looking at is how can you sort of increase line manager accountability. So in teams that are a bit siloed across a large organisation, there might be very sort of, accountability mechanisms that you might be able to put in place to adjust that form of behaviour. That's just one example. So many things you could do. Peer networks is a classic sort of point of turning to, that organisations turn to, that say, okay, this is something we might try, bring together individuals who face certain barriers, kind of build that sort of communal support network, I guess, of individuals sharing the same challenges. That's something we'd love to look at as well. Not evidence-based, we think it could be a really good idea, love to test it out. Progression, such a key issue. It's fantastic getting people through the door. What happens if they get stuck at a sort of, a grade or whatever it is? How do we get people through that? Can we make progression interviews as equally kind of skills focused and ability focused as potentially, those recruitment interviews are? So, it's kind of abstracting that sort of that anonymization of progression, I guess. Can you do that as well? All these sorts of things, absolutely, that's critical issue for us to deal with, and it's given as equal weight for us as well. One of the things we're looking at is around how do you collect diversity information. Now, obviously, lots of nuance around that as just a topic in general, but one of the things we're looking at is, if we believe it's a good idea, how do you do it well? How do you ask those questions correctly? How do you collect that information and ensure that it's working for individuals and you're using it in a way which supports them in role? So yeah, absolutely.